Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum, peace be and mercy and blessings of Allah be with all of you. Thank you for joining me on this live post today. Today I'll be dealing with the Quran and its readings and manuscripts. So for today's discussion, which is part 4 of a long series, I want to deal with basically a question that was raised to me in a previous post about a debate that took place between a Muslim and a Christian. And the Christian debater brought up some manuscripts that were known to be early. And those manuscripts exhibited some variation from what we read today in our standard copies of the Quran, and so that requires an explanation. So I will deal with that, God willing. Let me begin by praising our Creator and Fashioner. I praise you, God, the Creator of the heavens and the earth, the designer of the entire universe. We ask you to send peace and blessings upon all of your prophets, your messengers, all of the righteous people of all time. We ask you to bless all of the people of the world today. We ask you to save us from every harmful thing out there, whether it be the coronavirus, any other virus, any disease, any sickness, any calamity, any distress, even stress and anxiety. Ya Rab, O Allah, we raise our hands to you in humble supplication, and we look forward to your mercy and your guidance and your love. Protect all of the people of the world, and protect all of the people who are watching today, all of the loved ones everywhere. Okay, so now, manuscripts and reading. So if you've been watching the last few episodes of this, then you have a good background and you are ready now to tackle our discussion today. So I refer to you to a book entitled The Hidden Origins of Islam, written by some Orientalist scholars, Karl Heinz Ollig and Gerd Puin. And in this, so we have a number of articles by various individuals. Most of them take a very critical stance towards the development and origins of the Islamic faith. Much of those stances are not actually widely held by Orientalist scholars today. Nonetheless, in one of these articles is written by a scholar who is otherwise well known in her field of Quranic studies, Alba Fideli, and here in her article she describes some variants that she found in some early manuscripts. So she entitled her article Early Evidences of Variant Readings in the Quranic manuscripts. So she points out some of the differences that she has found, and we need to deal with what these are. So I'd like to introduce you to another book that deals with such variances. Basically, Alba Fideli is referring to pages from an early manuscript, which is now known as the Sana'a manuscript. And that manuscript, or the pages of that manuscript scattered in various places, have been collected together, or rather studied together, in a two-part article which was done by Behnam Sadeghi and Huey Bergman, to start with. So in this article, published in Arabica 57, that's in the year 210. The article is entitled The Codex of a Companion of the Prophet and the Quran of the Prophet. So what Sadeghi and Bergman have done here is that they have taken all of these pages, including the ones that Alba Fideli was studying, and they have collated all that material, and they have shown us in great detail what the variances are, where they are found, and how they compare with the present readings that we have now. And in studying those variants, they have concluded that the variants which are found in those other manuscripts are, in fact, mostly due to, they can easily be explained as what they call auto-contamination. for example. And there are other explanations as well. Sometimes it's a slight slip of the hand. Sometimes they're the kinds of human mistakes that scribes make when they copy manuscripts, whether it be the Quranic manuscript, biblical manuscripts, or some other manuscripts. It's a type of error that human beings will be prone to making. And when they study schematically how these differences relate to each other, they were able to draw diagrams that will show the development of one reading to another. And in the end, they concluded that the readings, which are you see, they draw schematic diagrams like that. And then they conclude that the readings which are found in that ancient manuscript, which what was now recently discovered, those are probably due to mistakes which were made by scribes as they wrote. And one of the most frequent mistakes that give rise to a large variations is the type of mistake that is known as auto-contamination. How does that happen? It happens, let's say that someone is copying the Gospels. So they're copying one gospel, copying another one, copying a third gospel. By the time they're getting to the third gospel, they already have in mind information from the previous gospels. So while they're copying the third gospel, sometimes when they come to write an event in the life of Isa alayhi salam, what do? In their own minds, the words from the previous gospels are still fresh. So as they're writing, instead of writing and copying the present gospel, which they intended to do, in their minds, the words from the previous gospel starts to flow in, and they end up writing the words, not which they're looking at in front of them, that they should be copying, but the words which are in their minds from the previous gospel. So it's called auto-contamination. It's not that anybody's trying to forge anything at this point. It is just that that's how the human mind works. We write what's there in our minds already. So when we come to the Quranic manuscripts, what could happen is that someone has in mind certain words of the Quran, either that come before or will come after what one is copying, especially if one has memorized the Quran or has read the Quran a lot. So these words are very familiar. So you're writing something and you already know what's going to come next. So you have those words in mind already. And of course, you know what you have just written, you know what's in the past. So often we can see that the copyists have made mistakes in this ancient manuscript that is described here of the auto-contamination type, which means that they have written down words which are known from the Quran elsewhere, usually in close proximity to what they are actually writing at the moment. So we'll have a chance to study that in greater detail. So that I said there were two articles. That was one article. And then Benham Sadeghi teamed up with Mohsen Godarzi a few years later. That was a 210 article the first time, and this one is 2011. Actually published 2012. So a year or 2 years later, they compiled this, in which they have given a transcription of the text from that ancient manuscript. Now that ancient manuscript is called a palimpsest. Why is it called a palimpsest? That's the name given in academic circles for a manuscript that has been scraped off or rubbed off or erased and then reused to write something else. Now this also is very common in the ancient world. Why would it happen to a Quranic manuscript? Well, it could happen for the same reason that people put away Quranic manuscripts or old leaves of the Quran. One is that there's a lot of wear and tear on the old manuscripts, so people, after they feel, okay, it's not, a good idea to keep using this one, we have a better copy, so they make a copy of that, they circulate the better copy, the old and tattered leaves are then put aside, sometimes stored in a respectful place, and it's now to be discovered later on. It could be also that some manuscripts have errors because, as we said, human beings make errors as they copy, and hardly could you find an ancient manuscript and it'll be absolutely perfect if it's written by human beings. If it's dropped down from heaven directly by God, well then yeah, it'll be as perfect as God revealed it. But once you have human beings copying it, then human beings will make a slip here or there. You can try it yourself. You try to copy something from any book and then compare it later on, and actually you are not the one to compare it, because when you try to compare it, you will actually see what you think is in your mind. What's in your mind, you will actually see it in the page. So you have to get an independent verifier to make a comparison between what you were supposed to copy and your actual copy, and you will see that the verifier will find that there are mistakes. This is inevitable. So some of the ancient manuscripts which are now being discovered and studied, academics like to get their hands on those materials because from their point of view, this may bring to light some, as some would want to call it, the hidden origins of Islam, as if there is something there to be discovered and academics want to find it. But I will assure you that after all of these years of digging, they have not found anything that really calls into question the beliefs and the teachings of Islam. In fact, these manuscript discoveries, especially this manuscript discovery from Sana'a, of which we have the various pages which have been studied now by Albert Fideli and written about by Benham Sadiki and his comrades. These manuscripts actually verify the basic Muslim story about how the Quran came to be revealed and what was passed on to generations from the time of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. How the types of variations which were mentioned in the classical Muslim literature as having been found in the readings of Ibn Masud and Ubay bin Ka'b and so on have now been found to exist in this palimpsest. So that shows that what Muslim scholars were saying when they wrote in their books that Ibn Masud read like this and Ubay bin Ka'b read like this was not like fairy tale. They didn't just imagine it and they didn't invent those stories. That those were really the kinds of readings that are found now in this manuscript. Why is this important? Well, some Orientalist scholars had doubted the Muslim stories. They thought that Muslims were just inventing readings and crediting the readings to early authorities in Islam. Well, maybe they did that to a certain extent, but not to the extent that was described, for example, by John Burton in his book, The Collection of the Quran. So when he read that Muslim scholars are saying that Ibn Masud read like that or Ubay bin Ka'b read like that, he's thinking, no, Muslim scholars just made up those stories. That's not true. No other manuscript has been discovered that shows that kind of variation. The only kinds of variations we have found are in manuscripts which are basically the Uthmanic manuscript with some very slight variations which can be credited easily to human error, maybe a particle here or a particle there, one added, one dropped, or something like that. Instead of a wa, which means and in one place, there is a fa, which looks very close to the wa, except that it has a dot and except that it joins to the next letter that comes after it. But you can very well easily see that maybe if the writing is not very clear, somebody may have mistaken one for another. But more so, in memory, Quranic readers will find it sometimes very difficult to differentiate between where a wa is supposed to occur, meaning just simply and where a fa is supposed to occur, which also means and, but it means and as a kind of a consequence to what came before. But sometimes that the difference between the two meanings is not so very pronounced, depending on the context. And in that case, the Quranic memorizer may find it difficult, as he or she is reading, to determine for the moment, like, is it a wa or is it a fa, until one goes to check it either with a teacher or with a written manuscript. So I said I was going to show you another book, but hold on, let me show you that. So this is a study of the same palimpsests done by Asma Hilali, and her book is entitled The Sana Palimpsest, The Transmission of the Quran in the First Century. It's a very important book. In this book also she has done what Benham Sadighi has done in in those articles. She has given us a transcription of the Sana manuscript, and that's how the transcription looks. And you can see that the words are without dots, and they're without dots. See that? And there are gaps where it is difficult to read what is there in the manuscript, because don't forget, this was a scraped off manuscript or erased manuscript, and then another Quran was written on top of it. So another Quran copy, and that Quran copy is closer to what we're reading today. It's basically the Uthmanic copy as we are reading it now, with some slight variation, which again relates to the various readings that were known from various parts of the Muslim Empire and by important authorities of Muslim qira'at. And of course, these are acceptable among the Muslim community, within the Muslim community, so that's nothing strange. Now, turning to this text which Asma Hilali has prepared, we can see that there is nothing that Muslims need to be afraid of in what we are reading in this manuscript, because it does not attest to a different Islam, it does not attest to a different faith, it does not show that anyone was trying to meddle with the Quran and forge things and make it read the way that people want it to read. Now, to see how difficult the work was, see here we have a picture on the front cover of the book showing the two texts. One is in darker ink, that is the later text, and one is in lighter ink, which is underneath. So that text, though it had been erased because it was written with a certain type of ink, nowadays it is possible, using ultraviolet light, to discern what was there in the original. Like what was there in that earlier text. So that's why we can say that it says here, La taqul Bismillah. Do not say Bismillah. So that's a page, a part of a page where the 8th chapter of the Quran ends, and the next chapter, Surah Bara'ah, which begins without the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And as Asma Hilali points out, it seems that the scribe wrote, do not say Bismillah, which is what Muslims do when they come to that beginning of that surah. They do not say Bismillah at that juncture, though they say it for every other surah. So more details about that to be said, but let me give you a flavor of what is here. So here's the first page that Asma Hilali has transcribed for us from the Sana Palimpsest, and she has given us in red here where a later scribe has actually made a correction, so that you can see one correction there, a small correction here. Other than that, the text is as from that original palimpsest, and we can read it. You will see that it reads basically as we read it today, skipping that large correction. So we have it here. So this is from the second surah of the Quran, from verses 87 to 96, this particular page. And so it says here, بَلْ لَعْنَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِظُلْمِهِمْ. So that's the first variation, because in what we're reading today, it says that Allah has cursed them because of their kufr, because of their disbelief. And here it says, بِظُلْمِهِمْ, because of their wrongdoing. So now, did somebody deliberately decide to change it? Did somebody say, no, we don't like that it says this is because of their kufr or their disbelief, we're going to change it to make it read because of their zulm? No. The point is that the words kufr and zulm are used sometimes interchangeably in the Quran. So sometimes when it's talking about the kafirin, it says zalimin. And sometimes when it says talking about the zalimin, it says kafirin. It's because the idea in Islam is that the kafirin are the wrongdoers. Those who are disbelieving, they're doing wrong. And those who are doing wrong, they're doing wrong because of their disbelief. So the two things are very closely connected to each other. The idea of disbelief and the idea of dhulm, or oppression, or wrongdoing. It's not that somebody was deliberately changing it. It's just that they might have misheard, might have misremembered, and they couldn't remember that it's kufrihim, and in this place they put bezulmihim. Because again, with auto-contamination, you will find that similar things occur, like statements like this occur elsewhere, and it's with the word zulm. So it's easy to see that the scribe copied the word from memory as zulm here, whereas in fact it should have been kufrihim. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. فَقَلِيلًا مَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. So this is just like we read it today. So little do they believe. وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ كِتَابٌ مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ وَقَدْ كَانُوا min qablu yastaftihuna ala alladhina kafaru. So here we have the insertion of a particle qad, but it makes very little difference to the meaning here. So what we are reading says, whereas they used to, in the past, hope to gain victory over the disbelievers. And the addition of the particle qad here gives it an even further emphasis that this was in the past. But how are you going to translate that now? Because we've already used the pluperfect in English. We already said, and they used to. We used so this would be further in the past. A further emphasis that this happened in the past. And they used to. Whereas they used to hope for a victory over those who disbelieve. So there is an insertion of the particle qad here, which places things in the past tense, but it's already in the past tense. So it makes very little difference to the meaning. فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ. So instead of فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ, that's exactly what we read. فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوهُ. So عَرَفُوهُ. And now in Arabic, unlike English, we say in English we say we know it as well. But in Arabic more generally, like you would say, the thing which I did it. So there, that it is not used in English. It seems like cumbersome and repetitive, but in Arabic it's common. But of course it can also be dropped and the meaning is still the same. So here we have a situation like this, ma arafuhu, what they knew it. So ma arafu, what they knew, or ma arafuhu, what they knew it. So the thing that they knew. So the ho here is a little bit repetitious from our point of view in English. And in Arabic too, it can be dropped and it doesn't change the meaning. And here we have in what we are reading, فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا, without the ho at the end. And here in the palimpsest, we have مَا عَرَفُوهُ with the ho at the end, meaning it. And the two mean basically the same thing. So there is no change in the meaning there. So did somebody mistakenly insert the ha here? Or is it that in our standard text, as some might want to argue, maybe in your standard text you have the mistake. Okay, so if you're saying in our standard text we drop the ho, so what's the change in meaning? It doesn't change any meaning. It doesn't change anything we believe in or anything we do. We're going to translate it the same way. So in our minds, the verse means the same thing. When that which came to them, which they knew, it's the same. It's going to be the same translation either way. كفروا به, they disbelieve in it. فلعنة الله على الكافرين. فبئسما. So we have بئسما. We don't have the fa here, but here fa, as I said before, is something that is confusing to Quranic memorizers. Is it fa? Is it wa? Or none of those? So what basically happens here is that this is a conjoiner. It indicates that there is a new clause to be started here. So you remember that in Arabic in classical times there was no punctuation mark, none of the full stops and question marks and so on that we have now. So what indicated the start of a new statement? It is the wa or the fa or particles like inna and so on. So in this case we have the fa bi'sama, whereas in what we're reading today we have bi'sama. Now, I want to broach with you a principle in evaluating ancient manuscripts. When people look at two manuscripts, so one is a change from another, so they want to know, like, which one was the original, which is the change. Often they say it is the more difficult reading that is probably the original. Why? Because, for one thing, when a scribe is looking at what he intends to copy, he sees a difficulty, like something is not so very clear, and he thinks that other people after him will misunderstand what is there. So what does he do? He makes an insertion. He expands the text with a kind of an explanatory word or phrase to make it easy for the later people to understand, because he doesn't want anybody to misunderstand the text. And especially if this is the Word of God, you might say, why would anyone meddle with the Word of God? But sometimes a scribe thinks that maybe somebody else before me may have left something out. So I better fix it now, put it back in, because something is missing here. It needs to be clarified. What is interesting is that the text that we have today, the Quranic text that is being read by Muslims throughout the world, this actually is a difficult text from this point of view. From the point of view of memorizing and so on, we know that God says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have made the Quran easy to be memorized, so is there anyone to memorize it or to remember it or to bring it to mind or something like this? So that's on the one hand, but from the point of view of analyzing the text in terms of its grammar, the way things are said, you will find that if you're a student of the Arabic language, then the Quran is not always written like in straightforward Arabic. You find that things are put sometimes in a difficult way, and you need some time to think about it, to reflect, to understand what are the various parts of this statement doing with each other. Common situation is that in Arabic it is possible to put the subject all the way at the end, and we don't do that in English so much anymore. In the past it was done. So, for example, a bit of old language surviving today, maybe in the courtroom, where a judge asks the jury, "What say you?" So the word "you," which is the subject, we expect to come at the beginning, but it comes at the end. What say you? It comes after the verb. Whereas we would expect, what do you say? You say, as opposed to say you. But this say you is an old form of English. It was being used and can still be used today in a courtroom. So in Arabic, we have this phenomenon where you could be saying a lot of things, and the subject of the verb comes all the way at the end. So you have to read all the way at the end. In English, if you want to do that today, we would say by. So all of these things were done by such and such, and then you have the subject at the end. But in Arabic, it's normal to have an active verb, and yet you don't have the actor at the beginning. You have the actor coming all the way at the end. So that sometimes presents some difficulty, and we will see a good example of that if we have time today. Otherwise, we'll have to come back and deal with this another time. But for the moment, I wanted to explain the use of this fa. So the first of all, by putting the fa here, you have an expanded meaning. So it's not the shorter meaning. So usually, as we said, it is the shorter meaning, and it is the shorter text and the more difficult text that is often the original one, as we evaluate the manuscripts and see which has changed one from another. So in this case, we have in the Sana palimpsest the insertion of the fa, so that's the expansion. So that's probably the later one. Secondly, it is the one we have in our Qurans today, bi'sama, is the more difficult one because it does not have that smoothness that comes with putting the particle that shows that this is the start of a new clause. So we can see how a thing like a fa there, a particle, could have been inserted, and this was left like that until obviously later on people looked at it and they realized, okay, this text has mistakes, so rather than continue to circulate this, we'll just leave that to, you know, in a respectable place. In this case, they kept it in the ceiling of a mosque, and it is only in 1972 when the mosque was being repaired, and these manuscripts were found there, and then some European scholars, for example, Gerd Pruin, was invited to come and study these, and then people started making a big noise about it. Oh, we have found a Quran which is non-Uthmanic, and that will give insight into the origins of Islam. But after so many decades of studying that, people did not find, no one can find, because it's not there, really any good evidence to think that we have corrupted our Quran, changed our Quran, and corrupted our faith. And in fact, as I've said, the discovery of these manuscripts has actually verified a key aspect of the Muslim history of how the Quran came to be recited in variations by companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and then eventually to be standardized into the reading that we have today. So فبئس ما يأمركم به أنفسهم أن يكفروا بما أنزل الله بغيا وعدوا أن ينزل الله من فضله على من يشاء من عباده. So adwan is added here. So what is this word adwan? It means out of enmity. So the verse says, as we read it in our manuscripts today, in our copies of the Quran, so بئس ما يأمركم به أنفسكم أن تكفروا أن يكفروا بما أنزل الله. So it's evil that the evil is that which their souls are commanding them to do in terms of disbelieving in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed on the one that he favors, meaning our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this addition of the word adwan means they did it out of enmity. So now, okay, so we can see that a word like that is not something that Muslim scribes would have decided to leave out. If this was the original, that it said that the people before us were there, they had a scripture before us, then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes and preaches to them, and okay, so they're disbelieving in what he said. And if the Quran said that they disbelieved in him out of their enmity, then why would the Muslim scribe later on omit that word, that they did it out of enmity, that they disbelieved our Prophet ﷺ out of enmity? But you can see very well why a previous scribe would have inserted that word adwan, because elsewhere in the Quran it speaks about the previous nations and how they opposed the Prophet ﷺ baghyan wa adwan, out of transgression and enmity. So this is the auto-contamination. They get a word from a different place, and they bring it and put it here in the text as they are writing. It could be even that somebody has mistaken it in his own mind. He thinks he memorizes it, and he's trying to remember it, and he reads it, and he reads in a word that comes from another place in the Quran in a similar statement that has basically the same meaning, and he just slipped up and inserted a word there. So it's what is most probable is that this word adwan was inserted here where it didn't belong, and the Muslim scribes writing the copies of the Quran to hand down to us as we have it today have basically given us a faithful rendering of the original. So we can go on, and ala ma yasha'u min ibadi, on whom, so Allah has revealed this book on whomever he wished out of his servants, and so on. If we go on to the end of the page, we will see similarly that this old manuscript of the Quran basically corresponds with what we have today. So I need to take your questions and then bring this discussion to a close, and we'll have to return to this one more time to deal with some more examples with more details and to show where some people may have thought, oh, look, there is a major difference here, and why this is not a major difference, why we should still have full confidence that the Quran that we have in our hands today is really a genuine copy of that original revelation that came to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1400 years ago and transmitted by memory and also in writing. So yes, there have been what we might call some major variations in the recitations of early Muslims, for example, companions of the Prophet ﷺ. It seems that for some period of time, the Muslims had the choice to read this way or that way, but eventually the choices were becoming too difficult for people to make sense of, and there was a need for a standard reading. So that need was not found at the beginning, because at the beginning the main emphasis was in getting the meaning and the message, to apply it and to know the instructions from God, what we need to believe, what we need to do. Not so much the precise words in which we were being told to believe this and do that. And later on, as the community matured, the community now started paying attention to the precision in the wording of the Quran, to preserve it from the earliest and most authoritative readers, those who are known to be skilled in the reading. They have also learned from very important earlier teachers, so that their reading is dependable. It's not an invented teaching. And in this way, you can think of a funneling type of situation where at the beginning there is a breadth of reading that is possible, and then there is a kind of funneling so that there is less and less of a reading that is possible. Coming down to the writing of the text, it funnels down to that text which was prepared by Uthman radiallahu anh with the committee that he appointed. And that text allowed for only a limited number of variations, the kinds of variations that will correspond to this text. So variations like the ones that we find in the San'a palimpsest, where you have, for example, the addition of the word enmity in the one verse, that sort of variation could not survive among the Muslims, because it did not correspond to that reading, that writing which was prepared by Uthman radiallahu anh. But other sorts of variations survived. Like, for example, you look at that text which was given by Uthman radiallahu anh, because it did not have the dots and because it did not have the vowels, it was possible for readers to read different dots when they came to it. So sometimes one looked at the same text and saw a ya, the other person looked at the same text and saw a ta. However, when we look at the meanings that are generated from the two readings, whereas one is reading ta, one is reading ya, it so happens that they are basically reading the same meaning. So how did that occur? It could be because God, in his wisdom, already foresaw all of these possible variations, and he revealed his Quranic text in such a way that when it is compiled like this, even though Muslims would read it differently, they would still arrive at the same basic meaning, and the community will continue to be guided. So God could straitjacket everything into a narrow set of events for the future, or God can allow for a wide variety of variations in events. He could allow for a range of flexibility, knowing that it would be controlled, and within that range of flexibility, either this path or this path or this path or this path would all be acceptable to the Almighty God. So he knows that the Quran would be read by a wide variety of ways, but within restrictions where the Muslim scholars themselves will figure out, and the Muslim community as a whole will come to know what is the authentic revelation from God, and they will preserve that. So it didn't matter that there were more variations, and some variations could have been mistaken, but God is guiding and has has guided the Muslim community to preserve that copy of the Quran in the readings as we have them and in the written texts as we have them as reliable guides to the path of salvation, so that by following either the reading that is most common in the world, the reading of Hafs and Asim in the printed text that we have in the 1924 Egyptian edition, or whether one is reading the Maghribi text with the reading of Warsh and Nafi', or whether in more southern Africa, people are reading from another famous reader, Qalun and Nafi', or even some other readings like Duri and Susi and so on. All of these are acceptable in the Muslim Ummah, and the variations between them are very slight and do not change anything that Muslims believe, or do not have any great impact on or significant impact on Muslim practices. So I want to leave it at that and come to your questions. I'll have to come back another day and deal with some more examples that are found because I believe that Muslims, especially those who are having discussions with non-Muslims, need to know what these variations are and how to speak about them when they're asked, so that the Muslim does not have to become defensive or does not need to be afraid of this material, because this material is nothing scary. It is already what Muslim scholars have known about in the past. Perhaps they were lesser remembered in our recent times until these manuscripts were discovered, but they are in books which have been published up until recently. So it's not something that is secretive or hidden or that Muslims would wish to forget about. It is something that is very well known to Muslim scholarship, and we have a good grip of that material, and we understand what we're dealing with here. And in the end, we have confidence that the Quran that we're reading today is, with all of its variations that are acceptable among the 10 mutawatir recitations of the Quran, this is dependable as the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have no doubt about that. So let me then go to your questions. All right, let me scroll back to the beginning. And here we have, okay, so Kamal saying salam, wa alaikum assalam. Wave right back to Asif Anwar. Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. I think that's IJ Abdul Hakim. Question: did the historical Jesus believe that the Torah was uncorrupted? I have heard some scholars say that his quotations in the Old New Testament proves that he respects, but not that he thinks it was infallible. Okay, so Abdul Hakim, I'll have to deal with that another time, my brother, because I want to focus on the Quranic manuscripts for now. Okay, Furqan. Assalamu alaikum. Riaz, hello. Hello, Riaz. Yahya, say again the topic, please. Yes, the topic is manuscripts and readings of the Quran. Part 4. Samina, manuscripts and readings of the Quran. Okay, you've answered that for me. Azharuddin Muhammad, Salam Sheikh, does Iblis or Jinn have free will? If so, then why did Allah create human beings? Now, I'm going to deal with this even though it is off topic, because it is such a very important topic for Muslims to understand, and the question comes up a lot of times. So, does Iblis have free will? Yes. And why did Allah create human beings? Well, I think you're asking more than this. You're asking, if God is going to give free will to the jinns before us, then why are human beings so different or special? So it could be that having given free will to jinns and leaving them to use their free will, knowing that they could use their free will to disobey God, it could be that many more of the jinn kind were using their free will for evil purposes than God wants to tolerate. And so rather than let the jinn kind proliferate more, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided to create another creature, human beings, who will balance that equation such that human beings, while having the free will mostly use their free will for good things. And I know it may seem wrong to think like this, because we look around and we see human beings doing some terrible things. But look at all the people who are joining me here today. We're all in the search of truth. We're all doing something good right here. And there are many, many good things being done by human beings all over the world. The love that the parents have for their children and children have for their parents. The love that siblings have for each other. I know sometimes they fight too, but mostly they have love for each other. The love that people are showing in this time of crisis, when there is this coronavirus wreaking havoc in the world, and people are showing compassion. There are people on the front lines braving it every day, facing the risk, and administering to people who need help, protecting others while risking getting the disease themselves. All of these acts of charitableness and goodness, they amount to a great degree of good. So even though jinns before us had free will, yes, God created human beings also to have free will, but with the hope that human beings will turn out better than the jinn kind have been. And according to Muslim scholarship, this is the case. They say that jinns tend mostly towards evil, and Muslims, or at least the human beings altogether, tend mostly towards good. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. All right, Masihi. Dr. Shabir, is Arabic the language of God Allah prefers, and will it be the language to be speaking that we'll be speaking in Jannah? Now, very commonly, some Muslims, especially in the Arab world, will say Al-Arabiyyatu lughatul Jannah. Arabic is the language of paradise. But I'm not sure that there's anything authentic in the Islamic tradition to indicate that this is the case. And how we will communicate in Jannah, whether by minds or by words, this remains to be seen. That's a whole new, different experience, a different kind of world, and we should not expect that things will happen exactly the way they are said here. Sometimes the descriptions are given either in the Quran or in Hadith, but we should not read those descriptions literally, because that's an entirely different world, and it's only the use of language that is similar to our situations, but rather that could be an entirely different experience. So is it the language of God? Well, no. God speaks all languages. God, speaks not like human beings speak languages. I think the more accurate statement is for me to say that God knows all languages, and he understands all languages. So whatever language people are speaking, God understands that. God knows those languages. So what does he speak? Probably he speaks by the mind as well, but maybe it's a mental communication between God and his creatures, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, Osama, okay, you're replying to somebody else. Hashim is watching. I'll be right back to you. Irfan, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ali from New York City. I hope you and your family are safe during this time, and thank you for the informative presentation. Thank you, Brother Irfan, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and all of the people of New York City and everywhere. I know that right now in the United States, the death toll from the coronavirus has risen pretty high. In the UK as well, we hear news that the number has surpassed other European countries, perhaps even Italy as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of you, all of the people of the United States, of the United Kingdom, of the world over. Thank you. Okay, Osama, there are numerous occasions in the Quran where different words look exactly the same without tashkil. If we rely on the manuscripts alone, we would likely lose the original reading. That's why we have tawatur, or the system of oral tradition. Yes. So without that, when I was reading from this palimpsest, when I was reading from this, if I didn't know the verses roughly in my mind already, I would not be able to read it. But by knowing the verses, then you're able to read it, because no dots, no vowels, it'll be very difficult. So from the inception, the Quran was taught by memory. This is why a manuscript discovery does not shake Muslims, and sometimes non-Muslims find it difficult to understand. Why aren't Muslims responding to this? Why aren't Muslims agitated? Why aren't Muslims disturbed by the fact that there is a manuscript which has a different reading? Well, the basic idea is that the Quran has been transmitted down through the generations from one reader to another, but fully memorized. So, nowadays a child will go to a special school, maybe at about 7 years old, maybe about 10 years old. If they start at 7 years old, maybe by 10 years old they've already memorized the entire Quran. Some children haven't gone to school yet, and they are memorizing the Quran at home. And within a few years they memorize the entire Quran. So they learn it from their parents. They've memorized the book. And so with that in mind, you can see that the Quran, the truth of the Quran does not depend on a particular manuscript. This is what we need to understand. It's not because we have a manuscript and every manuscript has an equal claim to being the original. It's the memorized text which has been transmitted from one generation to another, which a student receives from his teacher in completion. That is the authoritative text for Muslims, and this is recited in mosques everywhere. Recordings have been prepared and so on. So for Muslims, this is the authentic Quran. So if you find an old manuscript of the Quran, it's possible that that was written by mistake. Maybe the scribe was inattentive. He inserted an extra word, he dropped out a word, or something like this. Or maybe he tried to clarify something. He thought that the text was a little bit unclear, and he thought maybe somebody before me made it a little bit unclear, and let me clarify it now. Or whatever, maybe he just made a mistake in his own mind. So things like this happen, but in the system of verifying the memorized text, where one goes to school and one memorizes the text at the hands of competent teachers, and then has to read it back and fixes it in his or her mind. Now the text is known. Of course, that too could be mistaken as a person tries to remember it a few years later, but then it is corresponding to the written text as well. So one has a reference point. One has a written text and one has the memorized text. So the two are constantly checked and compared one against the other. And this is how Muslims have that confidence in the book as we have it today. Okay, Azharuddin, Sheikh, what are these types of auto-contaminated verses? Are there any examples if someone tries to pinpoint these errors to win an argument? Yes, I will have to come back and give you more examples of that in a future post. So let's leave it at that for now. But I've already shown you some examples here today where, for example, somebody included the word adwan. They are opposed. The text is basically saying, as we have it now, that those people who received the previous scriptures, now the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, comes to them with a new revelation from God, and they are opposing this new revelation because of some kind of transgression from their own part. All right, so that's how it's on our own text today. Now we've seen in the Sana palimpsest, it says that they are rejecting these new revelation out of enmity. Here we have out of enmity. This out of enmity is mentioned elsewhere as the behavior of the people of the book. So it looks like whoever wrote this copy had that word in mind, and as he's writing this, he's writing the familiar verse here, and it's familiar from another place in the Quran with the word enmity in it, and so he inserts that word here. So that's called auto-contamination, where the scribe brings a word or phrase from another part of the Quran into what he is copying here at the moment. So it's not foreign it's not a foreign Quranic idea, but it's so familiar that the scribe mixes it up and puts it here where it did not belong. So that's called auto-contamination. It's not that anyone was deliberately changing the Quran because they don't like the message of the Quran. It's just that they made a simple type of human error. Okay, so Ali Shahab, hello. Arfana, salam. Jamal Dukhri, assalamu alaikum from Jamal in Qatar, mashallah. Thanks for joining me from Qatar, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and all of the people of Qatar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the entire Gulf region of, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the entire Middle East and all the Muslims all over the world, all of the people all over the world. Okay, I waved right back to Zahid. Osama, the stream is mirrored, so it's very hard to read the text. Yeah. Later on, inshallah, when you watch the video that will be posted at the end of the stream, then it will become clearer, inshallah, because then you will see it the right way as it is. All right, instead of the mirrored effect. Sorry about that. Okay, Jamal, the voice is low. All right, let me speak up a little bit then. All right, okay. محمد فتحي جزاكم الله خيرا عنا يا شيخنا الفاضل. Thank you, my brother Muhammad, for that beautiful prayer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward me and all of you. Thank you all for joining. It gives me all this, it gives me the energy to keep going. And I've been studying these things for years, and when I know that people are interested, I see from past posts that a lot of people have watched the series on Quran manuscripts and readings, and that gives me the energy to continue presenting more, because I know that there are people out there who are interested. Sometimes I think, okay, I studied all these things academically, but the average Muslim is not going to be listening to this. So if I get on the live post and start speaking about this, people will just tune out. But when I see that you are interested, then I'm given the energy to continue. So, and I see the love pouring in. Osama, J. Smith conveniently uses the wide dating of the wiped versus present text to place them as far apart as possible. Matthew 7:3. Why do you? Okay, yes. So you're right. When it comes to dealing with the Quranic manuscripts, I have found that my friend Jay, he takes a very critical approach when he comes to his own scriptures. He tries to prove that the scriptures are early. So I found, like in past debates, for example, he championed the writing of Karsten Thied, who said that we have an early manuscript of the Gospels, but other scholars have shown that Karsten Thied was way out of whack with this, and the Gospels are not so early. I mean, the copies of the Gospels that we have today. But it just goes to show how, in my experience, I have found that J. Smith, he's not here, so it's not really fair for me to talk about him. Maybe eventually he and I will have another debate, and then some of these issues may come up again. But I found that over time, and this is now public knowledge, he has championed things from academic scholars which he has either misunderstood or overplayed. You see, in the world of academic scholarship, what is deemed important is not necessarily what is deemed important in religion and on the big questions of religion. For example, big question of religion. We want to know, should we follow Islam or follow Christianity? Academics are not dealing with that. Like, they're not going to answer this question. They're dealing with nitty-gritty stuff. They're dealing with things which most of us will find pedantic. Like, who's interested in that? One has to really, some academics, you might be surprised at what they're studying. Sometimes a whole PhD thesis is done just on the meaning of one word. But the average public is not interested in those things. We want to know the bottom line. Okay, so which religion are we supposed to follow? So J. Smith often misunderstands this. When he comes to academic scholars having various theories about the origins of Islam, sometimes J. Smith has championed things which were said by academic scholars and later disproved by other scholars, and sometimes even disapproved by the very scholars themselves who once championed the idea. So, for example, when Patricia Crone was in her heyday of championing her book that she co-authored with Michael Cook, Hagerism, this is what J. Smith was championing in his debates against Dr. Jamal Badawi and against me as well. And then later on, Michael Cook went his own way and started to argue that the Quran as we have it now actually goes back to very early times. And so this whole Hagerism thing has been thrown out of the water. And even Patricia Crone herself had vastly revised her theory and now says that the Quran is within a couple of years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we cannot just champion the. Maybe I said that wrong about Patricia Crone. What she said actually was that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something to do with the date of his death. And I have to revise that now. But the important point is that Patricia Crone actually took back much of what she said and what Jay Smith has championed in his debates against Muslims. So he just runs with the latest theory, anything that is the most outlandish, and tries to use that to be a hammer against Muslims in debates. But, we shouldn't approach debates like that. We should come with honesty and sincerity. We really want to find the truth. Look, if Christianity is true, I want to follow that. If there's another religion out there, it doesn't have to be Christianity, that is the truth, that's what I want to follow. Why would I waste my life on a particular religion if that's not the true religion of God? I want to find the truth. If Jesus, on whom be peace, is God, I want to be one of the first to worship him. If Jesus died for my sins, why shouldn't I accept that and be happy about it? And then, I know that somebody has died for my sins. That's wonderful. So why would I want to reject that? So I want to know the truth. And if the truth is out there, I want to find it. So I'm not going to try to, throw in everything that counts, for the moment as a winning argument, even though it will turn out to be false later or valueless later. I want to use genuine points. And this is why often in my debates with other faiths, you will find that I try to use this kind of information which is widely accepted, especially by scholars of that faith itself, because that gives me great confidence that this is a valid point. Because if it was not a valid point, then why would the followers of the faith itself admit the point? Because what normally happens is that people preserve a religion, there are attacks from the outside, and those from the inside are defending against those attacks, and then sometimes it so happens that those on the inside see that the attacks are actually formidable and it's difficult to defend. And then they come to think about it and they realize, wait a minute, those points are right that the opponents are raising. So when those on the inside admit to the truth of those points which are being launched from the outside, then that seems to be like a widely accepted point, because both the critics are saying it and those inside the faith are also accepting it. So that's the kind of point I like to use in our dialogues and debates. In that case, I'm asking our Christian friends in particular, but others as well. So, this is what your own scholars have already accepted. So why is it that you're not accepting the point? But now if somebody comes back to me and says, oh, but Shabir, look at what the ultra critics are saying. So you have critics, and then you have ultra critics, and look at what the ultra critics are saying. So in academic circles, you have like a body of scholarship, and generally that body of scholarship today holds that the Quran that we have and that Muslims are reading the world over is basically a faithful representation of the Quran as it was read within the lifetime of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that idea was in European scholarship among Orientalists for a long time, since Theodore Noldek. And then it was challenged by some more recent scholars like John Wansborough, and I mentioned Patricia Crook, and even Patricia Crone and Michael Cook. But now the table has swung back, and there is more of an acceptance again of the basic position that was already outlined by Theodore Noldek, of course with some variations. And I should be very clear, if a Muslim is thinking, okay, the Quran as we have it in our hands, this is the only text of the Quran, then that's a very simplistic understanding of the Quran. Now we know that and we've always known, but now the public should know that the Quran exists in a variety of readings that are acceptable to the Muslim Ummah, and even in some printed texts that vary one from another in some very small particles that were known from the very earliest times, from when Uthman radiallahu anhu himself is said to have commissioned copies of the Quran. Observers have noted that there are variations in the manuscripts from one city to another. And this is documented in Muslim books. So the average Muslim doesn't know this, and that leaves the average Muslim as an open prey to be attacked by those who are studying this information for the purpose of attacking the faith of the Muslims. So now, I've digressed a lot there talking about the approach of some Orientalists and of those who are debating with Muslims. So then, to cut it short, the academic scholars are interested in the nitty-gritty. Like they want to find, okay, how was this word exactly pronounced? But the fact that they're talking here about a difference and they're saying, okay, this one read it this way, that one read it this way, it could be pronounced this way or that way. If it's pronounced this way, what is the implication? If it's pronounced that way, what's the implication? That's the stuff of academic scholarship. But it does not determine the truth of the religion or the falsity of the religion. But now, somebody like J. Smith will come and seize upon information like this and come to the Muslim and say, okay, so you thought that the Quran is only read one way, right? Okay, yeah, but here is another way. You thought that there's only one copy of the Quran and all copies must agree with each other exactly, letter for letter, dot for dot. Here is another copy with the dots in a different place, ha ha ha. So they then confuse the average Muslim. But, I don't go to our Christian friends with such nitty-gritty stuff because I know that's not what's important. I go with major stuff. Like, we're not arguing about whether Isa alayhi salam said the words precisely as they are in the Gospels now. I'm glad to accept wide swaths of the Gospels as sayings of Isa alayhi salam without bothering about whether he said these exact words. We know he didn't say the exact words. We know that he didn't speak the English language, so if we're getting it in a translation, and you say, okay, but we have the original Greek. And he generally did not deliver his teachings in Greek. He would have delivered his teachings most likely in Aramaic, which was his mother tongue. So in the Greek as well, we have a translation. So at the very inception, you have a translation of what Isa alayhi salam said. Whereas in the Quran, we have it still in Arabic. And we are told that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an Arabic speaker. The Quran itself attests to the fact that he came in an Arabic environment. Otherwise, God would have revealed the Quran in a different language. So we've gone past all of those nitty, but still, in spite of the fact that we have a translation of the statements of Isa alayhi salam into Greek, still I am willing to accept large swaths of the sayings as they appear, even in an English translation, which is a further translation. If I look at the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel, I'm willing to say along with Jesus, blessed are the meek, and so on. Blessed are the peacemakers. I have no problem with that. So we're not going to decide, no, but Jesus, did he say these exact words? No. That only comes about when somebody's trying to prove something major. They want to prove that Isa alayhi salam claimed to be God. And we're saying, well, wait a minute, that's a major claim. Like, you have to have good proof to say that a person who walked in Palestine 2,000 years ago, this was actually God who created the heavens and the earth. Like, you have to have a better proof than this. So first of all, the man himself must have said it. Otherwise, how would you know? If a man is walking around doing a lot of great things, you might suspect that he's God, but you wouldn't know for sure. Because he could be a great angel. He could be a messenger of God who was given some powers by God, and he's acting out those powers. So we have to ask him, like, who exactly are you? Tell us, please. And it's so obvious that in the Gospels themselves, people were coming up to Jesus and asking him, like, who are you? On what authority are you doing all these things? So it didn't mean automatically that he's God. We have to ask him. We need to know. Like, something has to point definitively to his identity. You cannot just suspect that a man is God and then go around telling everybody, hey, this man is God, because you could be calling people to worship somebody who is not God, and that would be blasphemy in the monotheistic religions. So that is when we need to know for sure, did Jesus say exactly these words, or what exactly did he say? And that's when I come to major points of showing the development among the Gospels. So for J. Smith or anyone else to show something comparable with the Islamic faith, they would have to have 4 Qurans, or let's say even 2 Qurans. They would have to have something like the Sana Palimpsest, and they would have to say, see, the Sana Palimpsest used to say that there are 2 gods. And now you guys narrowed it down and you have only one God. You have a big problem here. Look, the Sana Palimpsest used to say that Jesus is God, and you guys didn't like that. So you took that out, and your Qurans is now saying that Jesus is not God. Ha ha ha. So I've proven that you guys have changed your Quran and departed from the original faith. That's the kind of thing that would be comparable. But there's nothing such comparable, because we see in the Sana Palimpsest that there is nothing so major. Sometimes there is an inversion of words. Sometimes but basically saying the same thing. So it's like, if we say Allah knows what you're doing, that's the same as whatever you're doing, Allah knows. So sometimes you find a variation like this in two manuscripts of the Quran. Compared with what we're reading now, we find in the ancient manuscript that the wording has been moved around, but basically it's the same meaning. So Muslims have not been changing the Quran to suit themselves or to discount important teachings and instructions from God, and this is what we need to understand. So, and which I wish that my friend Jay Smith will understand as well. But perhaps we'll have another debate eventually, and we'll go over these issues in a little bit more detail. You're right, Osama. We have to be fair to, we Muslims need to be fair in our criticisms of other religions, and we're asking the people of other religions as well to be fair in your criticism of Islam. We know that we start from different viewpoints. Of course, we believe in one faith. We're going to look at the other one a little critically. That's natural. We have to try to overcome our own biases and try to look at things objectively as we can. But still, everyone will still have his or her original bias to a certain extent. It's hard to overcome that completely, but we need to try. Okay. Saleh, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shabir Ali, wa alaikum salam. I'm going to go through very quickly now because I'm watching the time. Nice to see you, mashallah. You too, my brother. Jamia Mahmoud, Hajj Mahmoud. Assalamu alaikum, brother, wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. Saleh, my device is out of order, no sound, but it looks like you're explaining something very important. Okay, hopefully, inshallah, my sound is okay, hopefully that is. And in that case, the video will be up soon, and you will be able to watch it again, inshallah, and share it, please. Okay, Sharer, lots of love, Masih, Dr. Ali. Why the need to overwrite an existing text when it's just a variation of vowels? No, it wasn't only a variation of vowels. We have seen also that sometimes the wording is slightly different, and it could be that because that wording was either thought to be mistaken, or because when Uthman radiallahu anh issued a standard copy of the Quran, that came to be known as the dependable copy of the Quran, to be circulated everywhere. And when Muslims knew that this came from a committee, it's different from what individuals may have written on their own. Now, Asma Hilali herself, who did this careful study, she has a theory that the text remember we said that she read here, La taqul bismillah. So where she's reading La taqul bismillah, those are not actual words from the Quran, but they were written in this palimpsest. So the people, sometimes they might have written things which are their own explanatory comments, which this would be at the moment, like La taqul bismillah. It's a kind of reading instruction. It's telling the reader, don't say bismillah at this point. So one might mistake that as part of the text of the Quran itself. So to avoid all of these problems, it was safer for Muslims to put aside those copies of the Quran which at the time had not been verified by the committee which Uthman radiallahu anh prepared. Remember, it's known in the Islamic tradition that he prepared a committee of 4 persons who were experts in the Arabic language, and they had known the Quran from the very start, especially Zayd bin Thabit, who prior to Uthman radiallahu anh had already been commissioned by Abu Bakr to make such a collection. So he had a lot of experience dealing with the Quranic manuscripts and original written material. And so based on the memory work of the collectivity of companions at the time, because this was all done in public, announcements were made, whoever had anything about the Quran should bring it forward. So nothing could have been excluded if it needed to be included, and nothing could have been included if it didn't deserve to be part of the Quran. And so after this public effort to prepare like this official copy, then naturally Muslims who had copies that they wrote on their own with various levels of skill in writing that could have had mistakes, the better thing for them to do was to put aside their older and now tattered copies and use that which was prepared and sent out as the official copy, verified by the collectivity Muslims at the time. So that's why, in putting aside one of those older manuscripts of the Quran, one might figure, okay, the leaves are still valuable if it's not tattered. So what we can do is we can erase the previous writing and we can copy the newly verified text of the Quran on top of that, and that way we preserve the skins, and we have like a copy of the Quran that we can faithfully read and confidently represent as the Word of God. So that's why. Okay, and Jamal, the Maghribi Quran has fa in the place of qaf. That is because their lahja. Can you expand on that, please? I don't know what you're referring to, Brother Jamal. It could be that you have found a copy of the Maghribi Quran, and what looks to you like a fa, because it has one dot on top, is actually qaf. That's because of the choice of where to place the dots that emerged among various scholars. So most commonly, the Qurans are found with the letter qaf having two dots on top. But the Maghribi Qurans have the letter qaf with one dot below. It's one dot below for the fa and one dot above for the qaf, if I remember correctly. So if you're looking at it then, and you're looking at what looks to you like a fa, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, that should have been a qaf, and you're thinking that the Maghribi Quran has a qaf, has a fa in the place of the qaf. No, it's not that they have a fa in the place of the qaf. It's just that they write the fa and the qaf differently than the rest of the world. So rest of the world, we write the qaf with two dots on top and the fa with one dot on top. But in the Maghribi Qurans, if I recall correctly, they're writing, and some people here may be watching from the Maghrib, they can correct me. So they're writing the qaf with one dot above and the fa with one dot below, something like this. So they haven't changed anything. They're just placing the dots differently. This is a convention of writing, like a font, like a different font. You can choose between a wide variety of fonts nowadays. Some of them are very stylistic, some are Gothic, some are old style. So they're different styles, and sometimes the letters look a little bit strange, but only by looking at it carefully you realize what this is. These are different fonts, you can say. They're using different fonts, but basically it's the same wording, the same meaning and message. Okay, Laura, respected Dr. Shabir, were there any special rooms or other structures ever constructed in mosques or elsewhere as storage places for Quranic manuscripts that had become physically damaged or worn out? Laura, I'm not aware that any such thing has been prepared. Okay, so you're mentioning the Geniza. I was going to mention that as well. Okay, Shabir, yeah. As was done with Geniza, such as the Cairo Geniza for Jewish manuscripts. So we know that, in fact, in one of my courses, I was studying some some manuscripts which were found in Geniza, both in Arabic, which were Geniza manuscripts. But no such thing was known to have been kept in Muslim quarters. And so we found that, for example, this one stash was there in a mosque ceiling in Sana'a, but that seems to be like a rare find. I'm not aware that there has been other such storages of older manuscripts. Okay, Farouk Master is my good friend, mashallah, bringing back memories from when I used to visit the UK in the 1990s. Salam, yet another amazing insight into manuscripts of Sana'a. Things make more sense now after following the series carefully. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for your academic approach and work. Thank you, Brother Farouk. Mashallah, jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for joining and for your kind comments. Sheikh Nasser, I'm going to end very soon now. Assalamu alaikum. Jack Michaels. LSU Hospital Torture. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about. There's something entirely different. I'm sure it's important. We'll have to look at that later. Misa, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shabir Ali. I hope you and your family are in the best of health. I would like to know, how can we make up for years of our missed prayers? Very quickly, because this is an entirely different topic, the Indo-Pak subcontinent scholars generally prescribe for you to do what is called qada umri. They say that with each prayer you can intend to do one more. So you finish one prayer, just immediately get up and do one more, thinking that you're doing a past prayer. And you can intend either I'm starting from the beginning or either I'm starting from the end to cover up all of those missing years. But other scholars say no, there's no such thing, because there's no such mention that the Prophet, peace be upon him, ever prescribed what is called qada umri. If you've missed them, that's unfortunate. Just make tawbah, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and keep going from here on, and don't try to miss them. But if you have missed only a few, like let's say, for a day or two, then you can easily make this up. It's not a big burden. But to burden somebody with so many years, you might actually make it difficult for somebody to come back, because if they were astray for, let's say, 20 years and now they want to suddenly turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we tell them, but you know what, you have to make up for all of those missed years of prayers, it might be overwhelming. So the bottom line is that you don't have to do it, but if you want to do it, that's how. Okay, you know what, I'm going to beg your leave now and try to end this very quickly. Let me see if there's any one last comment that I need to deal with very quickly. Mohammed, Justin, please try to talk about Christian Prince challenge to you. Would love to hear your discussing about his challenge. Well, let me address that, because this comes up again and again. I don't know why people keep doing this. I'm not saying you, but it's out there, and that's why you're repeating it to me, because some Christians are asking, why aren't you debating Christian Prince? So how do I do debates? That's if you ask me, why didn't I debate this person or that person or that person or that person? Well, I mean, the list is long. There are many persons that I haven't debated, but the real question is, like, what's the opportunity to debate? Like, if there's an opportunity to debate and I'm turning that down, then you can ask me, okay, why did you turn down that opportunity? So how do opportunities arise for debates? Usually I don't go seeking out people to debate. I used to do that when I was young and more energetic and, full with a lot of zeal. So then I used to go and approach people and say, okay, would you like to debate? Let's have a debate over this. And at that time, I naively thought that if you have the right points and you confront somebody in debate, they will just cower down and accept whatever you're saying. But as I am matured, I realize and through experience, it's not like that. Even though you're showing people the difference between black and white, they will still claim white to be black and black to be white. That's just the nature of people. So I've lost some of that zeal. Plus, I've become busy. And so I don't seek people out to debate. Now people seek me out to debate. So then who? It's not just that individuals call me up and say, hey, would you like to debate? And then I say yes. No, usually an organization is planning a debate. So the organization has a Christian representative already, and they're saying to me, look, we have a Christian representative who would like to debate. Can you debate for the Muslim side? And then, after studying the organization, is that an organization whose banner I want to appear under? And then I look at the other person as well. Is that a person I want to debate? Now, if I decide not to debate a person, it's not because I'm afraid of a person or afraid of the points which the person will bring forward. It could be that the person and me do not speak the same language. I mean, it's not going to happen. Nobody's going to propose a debate between somebody who speaks Portuguese and asking me to debate even though I don't speak Portuguese, of course, but I'm trying to make a point here which I hope you will see. So the language has to be the same, and it's not only the language, whether it be Chinese or English or whatever, but the nature of language. Like, are we speaking an academic language, or are we speaking a kind of a street language? So if that person is, from what I can see, speaking a street language, and I want to cultivate an academic discourse, I know that I'm not going to debate that person. So there are many different reasons why I may not agree to debate a person. In the case of Christian Prince, I have not found a reputable Christian organization to champion him as their defender and invite me to a debate with him. I've mostly been getting, instigations from, all and sundry. Why aren't you debating Christian Prince? So that's not how it works, my friends. Not for me anyway. There has to be a reputable Christian organization that says, look, we regard Christian Prince as our defender. And when I think about what that organization represents, then I will decide, do I want to be under the banner of that organization and be on their platform? And secondly, I have to think about Christian Prince as well as to whether or not he would be suitable for me to debate with. Maybe there are other people among the Muslims who are good debaters, better debaters than me, and better suited to deal with Christian Prince, and some other people who are out there. And the advice I had received from many of my Facebook friends in the past when I posed this question to them, should I debate Christian Prince, is mostly negative. Many of my friends said, no, you should not be debating him. There are other people who would be better at debating Christian Prince. So that's how the matter rests. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all to what is best. I really need to end it at this point because from past experience, my battery power may be running out, and I want to be able to save the video at the end so that those who are not able to see it now can see it later. And of course, you can see it with the text right way around without the mirroring effect. So I want to thank you at this point. Let's end with a brief prayer. I pray God, our creator, fashioner, creator of the heavens and the earth, I pray that you accept our humble efforts to learn about you, learn about your scripture, learn about history, learn about religion, and in trying to decide what is the right path. I pray to you, God, that you guide us towards that which is right, which is true, which is wholesome, which is pleasing to you in this life and in the life hereafter. I ask you, as we have gathered today from all around the world, from Qatar, from various parts of the world, from New York City and from elsewhere, I ask you to bring us together under the shade of your throne on the day of judgment in a situation in which you are pleased with us and admit us into paradise forever, Ya Rabbal Alameen. I ask you, and we ask you, for all of the things that we each individually need and desire. If these are good for us in this life and the life hereafter, we ask you to grant us those. Save all of the people of the world. Protect us all from the coronavirus, from every virus, from every disease, from every illness, from every sickness, from calamity, distress, the disaster, from anxiety, from stress, from mental illness. I ask you to protect especially the people who are in the long-term care homes, those who are confined to institutions where they have little choice and little space for social distancing. We ask you, Ya Rab, to protect them all, to protect those who are vulnerable, those who have low immune systems, and those frontline workers and those who are performing essential and necessary services facing the threat of the virus every day as they protect and help others. We ask you, Ya Rab, to protect and help them. We ask you to forgive the entire ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask you to bless the entire world and save us all from calamities in this life and the life hereafter. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. The next time I'll speak with you live on Facebook will be on Friday for my virtual sermon. That will be 1:30 p.m. Friday afternoon on this same Facebook platform. Join me for that virtual sermon. In the meantime, please support my work by going to islaminfo.com. That's where you can send me a question. You can also send a donation to the Islamic Information Center. That's the organization for which I serve. And I would be glad to hear more from you. So stay safe. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you, all of your loved ones. And I look forward to seeing you on Friday, inshallah, 1:30 p.m. Toronto time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.